This video is sponsored by Squarespace, and I bought another broken Xbox Series X on eBay. So now it's time to see if I can figure out what's wrong and if I can fix it. If you've been paying attention to my channel, then you already know that I bought two other broken Xbox Series X's from eBay. The first Series X that I bought, there was actually nothing wrong with it. I plugged it in and it worked just fine. The second one had a faulty power supply. I've got that power supply right here, and I'll be taking a look at that at the end of this video. But first, I'm gonna open up this Xbox Series X and see if the power supply is faulty on this one as well. And then hopefully I can fix that too. Let's do this. So this one's not in quite as good a condition as the others that I bought so far. There's a good number of scratches on the front. The bottom has a few scratches. The top is not too bad. And the back has definitely been opened before. You can see that someone has peeled this label off and put it back on. So who knows what I'm gonna find in this one, but let's get this back off and see what they did to it. You can see this entire back was bent. So whoever took this apart, this must have been their first one. Also, we got, this is a little loose right here, which I guess that just comes from the bend in it. Not too big of a deal so far. So here's the bad power supply that I'm removing, and here is the known good power supply that I'm temporarily installing, so we can test the rest of this console and see if it's good or not. This will tell us whether it's a problem with the console itself or just a problem with the power supply. Okay, now I'm gonna plug it in and see if it turns on. You think it's gonna work? Hopefully. Oh, it's not working. I feel like maybe I even smell some sort of electronic smell. This also means that I don't know whether this power supply is good or bad for sure, so I'm gonna plug this one into a known good Xbox Series X and then see if that Xbox will start up for me. And here we go, let's see if this one will start up. Yep. So that means we have a good power supply that came out of this faulty Xbox Series X that I took apart today. So now I get to start looking at other things that might be causing a no power issue. But before we go any further with this, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is one of the best website builders out there because you don't need to know how to code, you don't need a graphic designer, you don't need any of that stuff. Everything is built right into your Squarespace website for you. It doesn't matter whether you want to start an online store, start a membership website, or if you just want a personal website for yourself. Squarespace makes it fast and easy no matter the type of website you want. One of the things I love about Squarespace is you can start an online store all within Squarespace itself. You can have unlimited products, you can track your inventory, customers can check out right on your Squarespace website, and Squarespace also offers great shipping integrations. So everything can be done within the Squarespace platform. So when you're ready to start your website, go to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/TronicsFix for 10% off your first website or domain. I'll put a link down in the description that'll take you right there. Now let's get back to testing this Xbox Series X. And just to recap, this is the Xbox Series X that I took apart today. This is the good power supply from a different Xbox Series X. This is the power supply from this Xbox Series X, and I just showed that this is also good. This power supply is from the Xbox Series X in my previous video that wouldn't power on at all. I did isolate it to the power supply. I was gonna look at that next, but since the power supply in this Xbox Series X is good, I'm gonna save this till the end of the video, and if the video goes too long, I might have to save this for another video. Now that we're all thoroughly confused, I'm gonna start looking at this and see if I can figure out why this Xbox won't power on. Okay, and here we go. This is kind of a interesting setup, but hopefully it'll be enough for me to be able to figure out what's going on here. Yeah, I definitely smell some sort of electronic heat. Some component on this thing is getting pretty warm. Don't see anything obvious right now though. Okay, now watch right in this area. I think I might have even seen smoke. So let's check it out and see if we can see it again. Oh yeah, it's coming actually from down here, I think. Okay, I'm gonna plug this in again. It seems like when I first plugged it in, there's a good amount of smoke and then it kind of goes away. So here we go. Okay, right down there. So I've got it narrowed down to right here. So I'm gonna get this apart and then let's take a look at it. All right, so this right here is our problem, but we gotta figure out what's causing it. In order to do that, I'm gonna remove this motherboard off of this chassis so then I can see the underside of this and see if we can figure out exactly what might be causing that. All right, so now I have this bottom board loose. Now let's turn it over. Oh, here we go, look at this. That's a pretty good clue about what might be going on. And there we go. I see some greenish substance around here. I don't know if that's from what's come out of this component right here, or whether this was liquid damage. Usually this kind of greenish bluish stuff is from liquid damage, but I don't see any other signs of liquid damage on this board. So this could be just from this component burning up. So this looks like a little tiny BGA chip. So I'm gonna clean up this area, then I'm gonna remove it, and then I'm gonna see if I can find replacement parts or if we have to get a part from another junk console. It's always frustrating when you're doing repairs when a new console comes out because there's just hardly any parts out there available because these large manufacturers are not required to provide parts for stuff like this. So this little tiny, probably 50-cent part is not something that they provide for people like me to repair this. So unfortunately, this is basically just a junk board until I can get that part. So this $500 console is rendered useless because the manufacturer won't sell me a 50-cent part. All right, now that I've got this cleaned up, I'm gonna put this under the microscope so I can really see what exactly is going on down here. Okay, and you can see this component is really messed up. This caused some major issues. I'm not sure that this will even be fixable. Obviously, I'm gonna try, but this is a pretty catastrophic failure. This chip is just totally destroyed. This capacitor right here has been melted off the board. This trace right here is just totally melted. So I'm not sure if this is gonna be something I can fix. You can actually even see this is the inside of the board, the other layers on the board. And unfortunately, with no diagram especially, I just don't know what those layers are for or what they go to. So these layers have to stay separated or else they can short together, kind of like this board's doing right now. So next I'm gonna remove this component and then we can get a really good look at the board underneath and see if I think it's even something that is fixable. And here you can see the damage on the motherboard and also on the chip. This chip is just completely destroyed on this side. In fact, this pad just came right up with this capacitor and all. But looking at the board, it is just totally charred. All the layers are stuck together, basically burned in together. So this motherboard is most likely toast. I don't think this is going to be anything that is fixable, nor would it be too safe to fix because these holes are burned all the way through to the top of the board. When we were looking at it first, when I first saw the smoke, that was on the top of the board. That means that there are holes burned all the way through every layer of this board to the top side. So I think I'm just gonna call this one a junk motherboard. Now, if you remember a long time ago when I bought that big lot of Xbox consoles that had the Xbox One S's in it, there was a similar problem with one of the Xbox One S's where one of the layers on the board was connecting with another layer, and that was causing it to kind of smoke and short out just like this, except for there's one main difference, and the difference is that was only 2 layers of the board that were contacting. This board, basically all the layers, at least from what it looks like, all the layers are just totally burned together. So that's the reason why on that board, on the Xbox One S, I went ahead and just fixed that one up, whereas I feel like this board is just not something that is ever going to be totally fixable. Now, that's not all bad news. I need consoles to do experiments on and to steal parts from, so this one will be a great console that I can steal parts from and do other experiments, so it's not a total loss. Now that I've wrapped up this Xbox Series X, I'm going to clean that all up so I can start taking a look at this power supply from the Xbox Series X in my last video. If you watched that video, you know that the Xbox just wouldn't power on, and that's because this power supply is faulty. I finally have a few parts for it, so I'm hoping to be able to diagnose it and repair it in this video. So the first test I want to do on this power supply is with it plugged in to the Series X console itself. Some of you brought up the good point that sometimes these power supplies need to be actually plugged into the console for them to power on totally and put out the voltage they need to put out. And with that plugged in, we can check our voltages. Okay, we have 0 volts there and 0 volts there. I'm just gonna check all the voltages on this IC. 0 volts. 0 volts, 0 volts, 0 volts, 0 volts, 0 volts, 0 volts, and 0 volts. So most likely this IC is fine as there is 0 voltage coming into it. So I need to work my way down the line and see if I can figure out where we lose the voltage. So the other thing I like to do is use a thermal imaging camera to see if I can find anything that has too much heat. That potentially shows me where a direct short to ground is, as there will be a heat buildup in most cases if there's a direct voltage short to ground. So I'm gonna do that next and see where that gets us. All right, now we're gonna go over the power supply like this. And actually, I don't see anything yet. Let's go this way. Get it from the side and see what we can see. There is a pretty hot spot right there, it looks like. Kind of right under that large capacitor. Okay, that gives us somewhere to start with. Okay, and now I have this flipped over. So under that capacitor, there's another IC that I didn't see before, and it should be right in here. So let's see if this area shows up hot on the thermal camera. And it definitely does, right there. So that is right down here, right in that area right there. As you saw, I'm gonna have to take off that very large capacitor. So I need to take that off first, then hopefully I can get down and see that IC and see if it's something I can order or if it's just something I have to pull from donor power supplies. That big capacitor on the top side of this board has been safely discharged. So next, I need to get all the solder off of this pin and this pin. You can use solder braid or a solder sucker for that kind of a thing. I'm gonna use a Hakko 808. It's a vacuum solder sucker, so when I press the button, it will vacuum up the solder from the tip of the tool. Just like that. So I'm gonna put some flux on the pins. That'll just help the solder flow. And there we go. Now I need to remove that capacitor from the top side and hopefully then we can get to that IC. And there we go. That is one big capacitor, 450 volts, 220 microfarads. Now with that capacitor off, we should be able to remove this gray epoxy and check out that IC. Unfortunately, I've not been able to buy one of these chips. I did take one from this known good power supply, so I do have that one. It seems to be made by a company called Monolithic Power, and I can find mention of them on their website, and I even see a data sheet, but unfortunately I have to have an account, and you have to get approved for that account. So I've tried to get approved, and I'm just waiting to hear, so I don't know if I'll even be able to get the data sheet. So what I'm gonna do is remove this chip off of this faulty power supply, then we'll compare this power supply's readings with that power supply's readings, probably using an ohms test, maybe diode test, and then assuming everything looks good, I will install this chip, and hopefully that'll get this power supply working. So now I'm gonna use a hot air soldering station to remove this chip, and then we can test the board. Here we have each power supply setup. This is the bad one, this is the good one. Now I'm gonna take my probes and do an ohms test of each of these pins and compare them to each of these pins. They should be the same or very similar readings. If they're not, then we have more diagnosing to do on the bad power supply. If they're pretty similar, then I'm going to install the known good chip into this bad power supply and see if that makes it a good power supply. Now we have the IC under this big capacitor installed. I went ahead and installed the capacitor while I was there. So now it's ready to test. I'm gonna get this set up and then we'll plug it in and see what happens. So I have the power supply temporarily installed into this Xbox Series X motherboard. Is it gonna start or will it explode? That's what we're gonna find out next. Okay, plugging the power in. No explosions yet. Okay, here we go, pressing the power button. Yes! And we have power. So this Xbox Series X was fixed by replacing the IC under the large capacitor in the power supply. If you're looking to build any type of website, be sure to check out Squarespace. I'll leave my custom link down in the description so you can get 10% off your first website or domain purchase. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your support on my channel, and I hope you have a good one.